The night of June 13, 2021 in Santiago, the capital of Chile, was unusually quiet. The city streets, typically lively even at late hours, seemed empty. Only occasional cars disturbed the peace, their headlights momentarily illuminating dark alleys before disappearing around corners. There was tension in the air. The recent murder of a young girl had shaken the city, and the police were actively searching for the perpetrator. Among those awake that night was 25-year-old Valeria Vivanko, an assistant inspector at the Metropolitan Homicide Investigation Bureau. She was preparing for her next shift, unaware that this night would become horrific for her. Valeria Vivanko was born on May 29, 1996, in Chile. She was the third child in the family of Miguel and Jacqueline Vivanko, where older children Daniela and Michelangelo were already growing up. The family lived modestly but decently. Her father worked for a transport company, providing the main income, while her mother took care of the household and raised the children. From early childhood, Valeria stood out among her peers. She grew up as a brave girl, always ready to help others. These character traits, which would later become defining in her professional life, manifested in everyday situations, whether it was protecting the weak at school or helping neighbors. In 2014, the Vivanko family went through a difficult period. Valeria's parents divorced. Despite the breakdown of the marriage, both parents maintained warm relationships with their children. They developed especially close relationships with their youngest daughter. Valeria became a kind of bridge between the separated parts of the family, maintaining connections between all its members. It was during this period that Valeria's desire to dedicate her life to serving the law and helping people finally took shape. Her determination and natural inclination towards justice became the foundation for choosing her future profession. After graduating from high school, Valeria Vivanko took a decisive step towards realizing her dream. She entered the Chilean Investigative Academy. This decision was a natural continuation of her pursuit of justice and desire to protect people. Studying at the academy proved to be a challenging test. Valeria faced strict discipline, intense physical training, and complex theoretical courses. However, her determination and natural abilities helped her not only to withstand this pressure but also to stand out among her classmates. Teachers quickly noticed the potential of the young student. Her analytical skills, attention to detail, and ability to work in a team made her one of the most promising cadets. Valeria showed a particular interest in criminology and forensic science, often staying after classes for additional research. In 2016, Valeria successfully graduated from the academy with honors. Her achievements did not go unnoticed, and soon she received an offer to join the prestigious Metropolitan Homicide Investigation Bureau. In 2017, with excellent theoretical training behind her, Valeria Vivanko began her professional career at the Metropolitan Homicide Investigation Bureau. The first months of work became a real test for her, as reality turned out to be much more complex than training cases. Despite initial difficulties, Valeria quickly adapted to the new environment. Her colleagues noted her tireless work ethic and willingness to take on the most challenging cases. She never refused night shifts or working on weekends, understanding that crime doesn't have a schedule. The first successes didn't take long to come. Valeria participated in solving several complex cases, demonstrating an extraordinary approach to analyzing evidence and working with witnesses. Her ability to establish trusting relationships with victims and their families became an important asset for the Bureau. The department leadership quickly noticed the potential of the young detective. Valeria began to be involved in more responsible tasks, entrusting her with key aspects of investigations. Her dedication to work and professionalism earned respect not only from colleagues but also from representatives of other law enforcement agencies. With each passing year, Valeria Vivanko's professional reputation grew stronger. Her dedication to work and impressive results did not go unnoticed. In 2020, she received her first significant award for successfully preventing a jewelry store robbery on July 21st. This operation became exemplary. Valeria not only prevented the crime but also managed to neutralize two dangerous criminals without casualties among the civilian population. Soon after, Valeria was sent on a diplomatic mission to Madrid. There, she demonstrated her skills in international cooperation, supporting the logistics of an important vote that became the basis for constitutional operations in Chile. This mission significantly expanded her professional experience and strengthened her position in law enforcement. By 2021, Valeria had already reached the rank of assistant inspector. This appointment was a recognition of her professional growth and abilities. At 25, she became one of the youngest employees to reach such a level in the Metropolitan Homicide Investigation Bureau. The night of June 13, 2021 began for Valeria Vivanko as a regular shift. At 4 o'clock in the morning, a special operation was conducted in the city of Santo Tomás de la Pintana to check all incoming and outgoing transport. The reason for these measures was the recent murder of a 20-year-old girl nearby. Valeria was part of a group that also included Deputy Commissioner Felipe Gallardo Araya, Assistant Inspector Maria Ura, and Detective Leonel Alejandro Contreras Canales. Their task was to identify and detain a suspect who, according to information, could be traveling in a Kia vehicle. When the suspicious car came into view, Felipe Araya skillfully blocked its path with a patrol car. Valeria and Leonel got out of the car with their weapons ready to use. Suddenly, a shot rang out and Valeria fell to the ground, having received a gunshot wound. Everything happened in front of many witnesses. Colleagues immediately rushed to help Valeria, providing first aid. She was urgently taken to Padre Hurtado Hospital, where doctors fought for her life. Despite all the efforts of the medical staff, Valeria died 2 hours later. This tragedy became a shock not only for Valeria's family and colleagues but for the entire Chilean society. The death of a young, promising police officer in the line of duty caused a wave of indignation and demands for justice. The news of Valeria Vivanko's death quickly spread throughout Chile, causing shock and outrage in society. The media immediately picked up this story, interrupting regular broadcasts for emergency reports. The street where the tragedy occurred quickly filled with journalists, police officers, and concerned citizens. The National Chief of Police for Combating Theft and Crime Hotspots, Jorge Sanchez, made an official statement on television. He reported that Vivanko was shot by criminals trying to escape from the crime scene. Sanchez also announced the successful detention of two suspects, 19-year-old Miguel Calabrano and his 17-year-old accomplice, whose name was not disclosed due to being a minor. Chilean President Sebastián Piñera also made a statement, expressing deep sorrow over the death of the young police officer. He called Valeria a brave girl who was doing her duty and promised that the authorities would do everything possible to establish justice. The public reacted with mass demonstrations and demands to enhance the safety of police officers. Social networks were flooded with messages of condolence and calls for severe punishment of the guilty. The farewell ceremony for Valeria Vivanko took place in the department where she worked. The event gathered hundreds of people, relatives, colleagues, friends, and ordinary citizens who came to pay their respects to the deceased. The farewell ceremony was held with all the honors due to a police officer who died in the line of duty. Valeria's colleagues, including Leonel Canales, carried her coffin from the office to the hearse and then to the cemetery. The procession moved through the city streets, where people applauded, paying their last respects to the heroine. High-ranking officials were present at the ceremony: Interior Minister Rodrigo Delgado, his deputy Juan Francisco Gali, head of the Homicide Investigation Department Hector Espinoza, and the country's president. A 3-day mourning period was declared in the department where Vivanko worked and in the academy where she studied. Hector Espinoza presented Valeria's parents with the Chilean flag, which they later hung at home next to a photograph of their deceased daughter. Speeches by colleagues and leadership emphasized Valeria's professionalism and dedication to her work. This farewell became not only a personal tragedy for the Vivanko family, but also a symbol of national loss, which further emphasized the importance of investigating the circumstances of her death. Immediately after the tragedy, the official version of events was clear: Valeria Vivanko was shot by criminals during an escape attempt. The authorities quickly announced the detention of two suspects: 19-year-old Miguel Alejandro Calabrano and his 17-year-old accomplice, whose name was not disclosed due to being a minor. In June 2021, the first court hearing in the case took place. During it, Valeria's colleagues reported that on the night of the tragedy, they were conducting a covert operation, which is why Vivanko was not wearing a bulletproof vest and was traveling in a car without police logos. According to the prosecution's version, the suspects, trying to escape, intentionally opened fire on Vivanko. The court ordered both suspects to be taken into custody for 6 months, the estimated time for conducting the investigation. For the police at that moment, everything seemed obvious: the suspects were detained, the case could be considered almost closed. However, this version of events soon began to raise doubts. Relatives of the detainees stated that their children only confessed to accidentally hitting Vivanko with a car but did not shoot her. The mother of one of the suspects even filed a statement with the prosecutor's office, asserting her son's innocence and demanding the establishment of the truth. Despite the official version of events, Valeria Vivanko's family began to feel that something was wrong. Their suspicions intensified when they learned about some inconsistencies in the investigation. Valeria's sister, Daniela, in one of the interviews, stated that she had audio recordings from her sister's phone, which recorded that fatal operation. According to her, the recordings clearly heard Valeria's conversation only with Leonel Canales, which did not correspond to the official version of events. The Vivanko family, no longer trusting the official investigation, decided to conduct their own investigation. Valeria's older brother, Michelangelo, and sister Daniela began carefully studying the case materials, looking for new evidence. They even visited the city of Santo Tomas, where the tragedy occurred, trying to find surveillance cameras that could have recorded the real events of that night. The family's lawyer, Alfredo Morgado, drew attention to contradictions in witness testimonies and the strange behavior of some participants in the reconstruction of events. He emphasized that all detectives claimed they did not use weapons that night, although department head Sergio Munoz said the opposite. These discrepancies and inconsistencies only strengthened the determination of the Vivanko family to get to the truth, despite the official position of the authorities. In August 2021, the case took an unexpected turn. 3 investigators who participated in the investigation were suddenly fired due to possible involvement in the death of their colleague. On August 2nd, Valeria's parents were invited to the district prosecutor's office, where Inspector Juan Carlos Carrasco, on behalf of the police, offered them deep apologies. It turned out that their daughter died from a bullet from the gun of one of her colleagues. This news caused shock and outrage not only in the Vivanko family but in the entire society. Especially shocked was Juan Guillermo Vivanko, Miguel's son from his second marriage, who studied at the same academy as Valeria, inspired by her achievements. Suddenly it turned out that the department where he dreamed of working was involved in his sister's death. On August 4th, representatives of the Southern Prosecutor's Office released the results of an examination conducted by the Homicide Investigation Unit itself. It turned out that the bullet that killed Valeria Vivanko had a 9mm caliber, which is used in service weapons. This meant that the 3 detectives who accompanied Valeria that night could be involved in her death. During the investigation conducted by the prosecutor's office, serious violations and attempts to conceal evidence were revealed. It turned out that approximately 2 to 3 hours after Valeria's death, the police confirmed the detention of suspects. However, according to the prosecutor's office, both criminals surrendered themselves the next day, and only then was their detention officially registered. On July 29, 2021, the prosecutor received a report from the forensic laboratory, which had been kept in the investigation bureau for more than a month. It indicated the gun and bullet that killed Valeria Vivanko. The weapon belonged to her colleagues on the operation. It turned out that on June 17, Bureau experts conducted a ballistic check of the 3 detectives who were with Valeria at the moment of the tragedy and the 2 detained teenagers. Chief expert Jose Garrotti indicated in the report that traces of gunpowder were found on Leonel Canales' hands. This information reached the leadership of the unit but somehow was not used in the investigation. In addition, the forensic service report contained incorrect data regarding the trajectory of the fatal bullet. According to the document, the bullet entered the girl's abdomen from the front, but the ballistic study conducted by the Investigation Bureau showed that the fatal shot was made to the back. Experts also found a bullet with particles of Vivanko's blood at the scene of the tragedy. These facts caused outrage from the prosecutor's office and raised questions about possible corruption and attempts to conceal the truth in police ranks. Leonel Alejandro Contreras Canales, a 21-year-old police officer who worked with Valeria Vivanko, unexpectedly found himself at the center of the investigation. Before the tragedy, he was considered a promising young employee who had joined the unit only a few months ago. Suspicions about Canales intensified after the examination revealed traces of gunpowder on his hands. Moreover, his position at the moment of the shot, according to eyewitness testimonies, coincided with the trajectory of the bullet that hit Valeria. In November 2021, Leonel Canales was arrested on a prosecutor's warrant and taken to a pretrial detention center. At the first control hearing, the prosecutor's office officially charged him with manslaughter and demanded pretrial detention. Canales denied his guilt. He claimed that the traces of gunpowder on his hands appeared when he tried to stop the bleeding, providing first aid to Valeria. He also insisted that after the operation, he returned his service pistol with the same number of cartridges as before it. The trial of Leonel Canales began in March 2023. The prosecutor's office was confident in his guilt and intended to seek imprisonment for at least 15 years. The Vivanko family supported this position. The prosecution presented various reports and examinations which, in their opinion, confirmed that it was Canales who fired the fatal shot. They emphasized the lack of rational motives for using a weapon in that situation. Canales' defense, led by lawyer Eva Guerrero, based their strategy on the claim that their client did not see who shot Valeria and even thought he was wounded himself. They insisted that Canales could not have fired the shot due to his position and the trajectory of the bullet that hit Valeria. Additionally, the defense put forward a version about the possible involvement of Felipe Araya, the driver of the patrol car, in the shooting. They claimed that Araya could have accidentally fired his pistol without leaving the driver's seat. The court carefully studied the arguments of both sides, as well as additional evidence presented by the Vivanko family as a result of their private investigation. In May 2023, violating the ban on communication with the press, Leonel Canales invited journalists to the pretrial detention center. This interview came as a surprise to all parties in the process. During the conversation, Canales publicly declared his innocence. He claimed that Valeria was killed by Felipe Araya with a shot to the back, which allowed the real criminals to escape. According to Canales, the subsequent investigation was conducted with numerous errors, which led to his unjust accusation. This interview caused mixed reactions. The prosecutor's office regarded it as an attempt to create additional hype around the case. The Vivanko family was outraged that Canales was allowed to speak publicly. The court reprimanded Canales for violating the ban on communication with journalists. Canales' statement about Felipe Araya's possible involvement in Valeria's death forced the investigation to once again check all versions of events. Canales' lawyers presented additional evidence in favor of this theory. They claimed that Araya, known among colleagues by the nickname Crazy Shooter due to his tendency to use weapons unreasonably, could have accidentally fired while behind the wheel of the patrol car. In their opinion, the identical nature of Canales and Araya's pistols could have led to confusion during the investigation. The defense also drew attention to the fact that Araya thoroughly washed his hands before the analysis for traces of gunpowder, and his testimony about the events of that night was contradictory and changed over time. However, the prosecutor's office considered this version weak. They insisted that all pistols of the operation participants were thoroughly checked, and the evidence pointed to Canales as the shooter. The Vivanko family, conducting their own investigation, found some evidence that could confirm the version about Araya's involvement. They provided the court with reports from the Carabineros, which, in their opinion, confirmed this theory. These new versions and evidence forced the court to order additional examinations and witness interrogations, which significantly delayed the process and complicated the establishment of the truth. The judicial process in the Valeria Vivanko case continued until November 2023. During this time, the court carefully examined all presented evidence, heard witnesses, and experts. On November 17, the court announced its decision. Leonel Canales was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. This decision was a compromise between the positions of the prosecution and the defense. The court took into account that Canales did not intend to kill his colleague, but his actions led to the tragic death of Valeria Vivanko. On November 29, 2023, the sentence was announced. Leonel Canales received 12 years in prison. The prosecution insisted on 15 years, while the defense asked for 10 years. The judge explained that in determining the sentence, 2 years that Canales spent in custody during the investigation were taken into account. In addition, Canales was prohibited from holding any public positions after release. The Valeria Vivanko case had a significant impact on the law enforcement system in Chile. It revealed serious problems with corruption and concealment of information in the police. As a result of the investigation, 16 employees of the Investigation Bureau were fired, including high-ranking officers. Among them was the director of the Homicide Investigation Department, Jorge Marquez, who was accused of administrative violations. This case led to a review of internal investigation procedures in the police. New protocols were implemented to ensure greater transparency and accountability during investigations of incidents involving police officers. In addition, control over the use of service weapons was strengthened, and mandatory wearing of body cameras was introduced for employees participating in special operations. This tragedy also forced a review of the training system for young police officers, placing greater emphasis on ethical aspects of work and the importance of following the law even in difficult situations. The tragic death of Valeria Vivanko did not remain just a sad page in the history of the Chilean police. Her short but bright life became a symbol of dedication to duty and professionalism for many young officers. A square in the city was named in honor of Valeria. Every year on the day of her death, a commemoration ceremony is held there, during which people bring flowers and light candles. This tradition has become not only a tribute to Valeria's memory but also a reminder of the importance and danger of law enforcement work. A memorial plaque with her portrait was installed at the police academy where Valeria studied. The story of her life and service became part of the training course for future officers, as an example of professional ethics and selflessness. The Vivanko family, despite the pain of loss, actively participated in preserving Valeria's memory. They established a charitable foundation in her name, which provides support to families of police officers who died in the line of duty. Despite the completion of the trial and the sentencing, Valeria Vivanko's family did not feel that justice had been fully restored. They remained dissatisfied with the verdict, considering it too lenient for the severity of the crime. Valeria's parents publicly expressed their disappointment that Leonel Canales, by their calculations, could be released in just 9 to 10 years thanks to the early release system. They considered this unfair, given that their daughter lost her life. The Vivanko family did not stop their private investigation. They continued to search for new evidence that could shed light on some still unclear aspects of the case. In particular, they were interested in the motives for the crime and the possible involvement of other persons in concealing evidence. The family's lawyer announced their intention to appeal the verdict, insisting on a more severe punishment for Canales and continuing the investigation into the possible involvement of other officers in the tragedy. This tireless struggle of the Vivanko family to establish the full truth became a symbol of how personal tragedy can turn into a fight for systemic changes in law enforcement and society as a whole. The Valeria Vivanko case became a catalyst for significant changes in Chilean society, especially in the context of perception of law enforcement work and trust in them. First of all, this tragedy sparked a wide discussion about police transparency and accountability. The public demanded greater access to information about internal investigations and clearer mechanisms for controlling law enforcement activities. In response to these demands, the Chilean government initiated a series of reforms. An independent commission was created to oversee police activities, which included representatives of the public and human rights experts. This commission was given the authority to conduct its own investigations in cases of abuse by police officers. In addition, psychological support programs for law enforcement officers were strengthened. This decision was made taking into account the stressful nature of their work and the need to prevent emotional burnout, which can lead to mistakes and misconduct. The changes also affected the education system. Special lessons were introduced in schools dedicated to the role of police in society and the importance of mutual respect between citizens and law enforcement officers. The media also changed their approach to covering such incidents. Journalists began to pay more attention to investigating facts and avoiding sensationalism when covering events related to police work. Overall, the tragedy of Valeria Vivanko became a turning point in the relationship between society and law enforcement in Chile, encouraging greater openness, dialogue, and mutual responsibility. In a small square in Santiago, named after Valeria Vivanko, it's always quiet. Only the rustle of leaves and the muffled steps of passers-by disturb the peace of this place. In the center of the square stands a modest monument, a bronze figure of a young woman in police uniform, looking into the distance, as if guarding the peace of the city even after death. Every day, people come to the monument: police colleagues, academy students, ordinary citizens. They bring flowers, light candles, some just stand silently, paying tribute to Valeria's memory. This square has become not only a place of memory but also a symbol of the changes that have taken place in Chilean society after the tragedy. It reminds of the price of serving the law and the importance of justice. The story of Valeria Vivanko continues to live in people's hearts, inspiring new generations to honesty, courage, and dedication to their cause. Her short life left a deep mark, changing not only the law enforcement system but also the consciousness of an entire society. On the plaque near the monument are engraved words that best describe Valeria's life path: she lived to serve and died protecting others. These words have become not just an epitaph, but a call to all who dedicate their lives to serving society.